Welcome to Subject to Blackout. My name is Timo, and with me, as always, is Mike, and this is a special event. This is the first of our June series, the Furiously Fast Film Fest. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
I'm okay. This is like a marathon. It's not a sprint, so I'm trying to pace myself.
Well, that's good to hear.
I can't do all of my Paul Walker jokes right now. I gotta save them for the whole month.
Listen, I'm gonna take this a quarter mile at a time, okay?
Boom, Vin Diesel.
All right, let's just get straight into it. Mike, before we start talking about the films themselves, what is your experience prior to this with the Fast and the Furious cinematic universe at this point?
Sure, with the FFCU. Well, I mean, I remember seeing Fast and Furious in the theaters. We were like 12. And
We were.
Yeah, and like indie rock wasn't a thing yet.
I'll tell you what was a thing, and that was rap rock and Limp Bizkit, and that shit's in there.
Yeah. So I mean, but this was a moment where you know, like there were other people trying to replicate the Michael Bay experience of like, how can we direct movies towards this incredibly rich and diverse demographic of 12-year-old suburban white boys? Like I know, let's remake Point Break. So I remember Fast and Furious 1, seeing that in the theater. I remember watching Too Fast, Too Furious, and like as far as the movies go, that's all I remember. Like as a personal legacy, the way this franchise has impacted me is anytime I joke about a sequel of a movie, I will use the structure of Too Fast, Too Furious, and then anytime I change more than one lane of traffic on a highway and at rapid pace, I will call that a Tokyo drift.
So I have to agree with you. This film series. So I watched the first two movies this week. I can confirm after watching them that I have only seen maybe 15 minutes of either one of them before now, and I have seen less than that. I think maybe I've seen like 5 minutes of the third one. But I have not seen any of these movies pretty much ever.
There was one time you and I watched one of them and made fun of it, but I can't remember which one that was, and I don't remember any details.
Yeah, I might have been stoned. I don't recall.
We might have been.
That
Yeah,
also could have been like triple X. You know, I have no idea.
That's true. Yeah.
But I can firmly say that one of the lasting legacies of this film series will be, if you're making up a joke sequel, you can now use Too Fast, Too Furious as a template. This movie entered the pantheon of films that you can use just like their name to spoof any future movie with like Electric Boogaloo and Too Fast, Too Furious. So it's perfect for that, and that will probably be its longest lasting legacy, that and its inclusion of random hip hop artists throughout at least the first two films. I'm assuming
I certainly wouldn't call Ja Rule random. How dare you?
I think
he was one of the organizers of Fire Festival. Ja Rule?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very random up until recently.
Ja Rule.
Ja Rule has been out of the mainstream for quite some time before he created a bullshit fake festival on an island somewhere. But let's get straight into it with the Fast and the Furious. Mike, what were your thoughts upon watching this film?
Well, the first thing I thought about was that I knew we would spend the next month kind of like ragging on these films, and they're one of the most like financially successful media franchises of all time, and we're just
giant.
Like two assholes.
Correct.
So let's just put that out there before we do any of this. I mean, I'm someone who likes really stupid, pulpy movies. And like the heyday for kind of low budget pulpy movies was like the 60s through the 80s. That stuff has kind of died away. And like the Fast and the Furious, the original one, has like a lot of the trappings of like those classic kind of pulpy movies. So I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for like a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And as far as like a story goes, there's a lot of things that are goofy about the Fast and Furious, and there's one thing in particular I want to talk about. but like this isn't a movie I was anticipating to like take seriously. This was like a movie that was supposed to be fun. And I think this is true for probably all the movies, although we only watched two, but like the racing and the car sequences and how those are like choreographed and edited is like extremely fun. So
Yeah.
like that was one of my big takeaways.
What I was hoping for from these films, I have a bunch of friends who very much enjoy these movies. And I have a few people who either I follow on social media or whether they're content creators who also really love these movies. And they aren't just, you know, again, this is a multi-billion-dollar franchise. But I say this because I feel like this is the reputation that these movies had for a while, but obviously, don't have much anymore. But I felt like these were movies for idiots. And having never watched them,
I still might think that.
correct. And
but lots of different types
one
of
and
idiots.
two didn't necessarily dispel that for me. But what I was
Right.
hoping to find while watching these was some of the pulpy fun that I know my friends enjoy about these movies.
Right.
1 and 2 felt a little thin on that front. But you could see where some of the pulpiness can come from once you just kind of lean into it, which is, from everything I've heard, what they start doing after like 5. Like 5 on, they just lean into ridiculousness and just turn it into a superhero movie, basically.
Sure.
So while I'm looking forward to that, I was wondering what hooked millions of people all over the world to these movies in the first two. And for me, I think what must have done it was that these movies are serviceable. They're okay.
Okay.
As far as plot mechanics and whatnot. But the car stunts and some of the action sequences are legitimately entertaining in both of these films, the first two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing where these films go to as far as budgets and sequences that I've either seen or heard of, I look forward to the stunts being more prominent and crazier. My biggest disappointment was how much of the car work in 2 was actually CGI as opposed to legitimate car stunt. But there were a couple of scenes in The Fast and the Furious where I legitimately was impressed with the actual car stunts. I mean, the film basically opens up with 3 cars hijacking a semi-trailer. And from everything I can tell, that was done mostly practical, and it looked great.
It did. One of my questions, though, like the premise of the movie. So basically, okay, so the Fast and Furious, it's basically Point Break, but instead of surfboards, they're cars, and instead of banks, they're trucks. And so there's these kind of like elaborate sequences where these like synchronized cars like commandeer a truck, like highway robbery style. But why don't the trucks just like slow down and pull over? Like, I'm really impressed that they were like down to keep a steady speed throughout the extended sequence in which they were being.
Yeah, you would think at some point they would just, pull over.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about I don't know how much Paul Walker is in the series. I like Vin Diesel. I think Vin Diesel's fun, but
yeah, Vin is pretty good in the first one. I just kind of thought it was funny that he has like this elder statesman reputation, but considering what Vin Diesel looks like today, he looks like he's a baby in this movie.
Yeah, and he's like still kind of stacked. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he's like muscly but like thin, and now like these days he's just like a wall of a person.
He's like jacked. I know he's even more jacked. So I mean, I already said this, but I have like just like a lot of obnoxious stuff to say about Paul Walker for like the entire time that we do the series. But for anybody who wasn't around for the original Fast and Furious, one important thing to remember about Paul Walker is that he's part of this 90s tradition of male leads who didn't act so much as they stood in the correct place and delivered lines. And I'm talking about people like Kevin Costner, David Duchovny,
Wow.
and also Keanu Reeves between Bill and Ted, and I don't know, probably John Wick, because he's moving around in John Wick, but the rest of the time he's just kind of like talking about stuff. So Paul Walker, part of this
a
tradition,
little bit in the Matrix.
yeah. Whoa. So like, which is what sort of Paul Walker embodies, in part because this movie is just shot for shot Point Break, but with cars.
Yeah, and that comes across, and I'm not a Point Break aficionado. Again, it's one of those movies where I've seen like
Gary Busey.
I've seen like
Patrick
90%
Swayze?
of that movie on TNT, like
Keanu Reeves,
throughout the years.
Gary Busey.
Yeah, Mike, everybody knows Point Break. But like, I feel like one of the things, you know, I don't want to skip to the end of this movie, but here I go. One of the things that doesn't make any sense to me is that at the end of this film, he, like, this entire movie, Paul Walker's like, we got to catch this bad guy. No, like, you know, his handlers are like, it's Dom. And he's like, it ain't Dom,
No.
it's this Asian guy.
And they're like, yo, that's racist. You should check your privilege, Paul.
and it's not the Asian guy. And then right at the end of the movie, and I was not expecting this, they're just like, yeah, no, Dom was the bad guy. Even though he's been like totally a stand-up dude the rest of this movie, like he's been the bad guy the whole time. And that's when I was like, oh, well, like, I guess Dom is going to have to, like, give a reason as to why he's doing these robberies. Like, someone's controlling him, or, like, his sister, you know, needs her medicine, and this is the only way he can get the money for it, or whatever. Like, whatever the fucking thing is, and that's why Paul Walker will let him go. But it's just, no, like, Paul Walker just decides, like, oh, he got into a really bad car wreck, which was another great practical stunt where they jump past a CGI train and you're like, all right, that was pretty cool. And then it's just like, boom, sideswipe.
Boom. Yeah.
I was like,
also, yeah, Vin Diesel was just driving that car for like 5 minutes too.
Yeah.
He's like, oh.
Yeah, and I really, like, when he got hit, I was like, oh shit. Like, that was legit. Like, someone was in a car and they got hit really hard. And that looked great. But then, like, Paul Walker's just like, you learned your lesson. Get out of here, you rapscallion, you. And it's just like, no, he's a bad guy. Like, the whole movie made him seem like, oh, he's this great dude. And then they just turn him into the actual villain, but they don't go through with the consequences of that, and they just let him go. And to me, Point Break, like, I feel was much more about, like, the relationship of two men, like, coming in the way of the line of duty. And this didn't feel like that, because in Point Break, correct me if I'm wrong, Keanu knows Patrick Swayze is the bad guy the whole fucking time.
Right.
Yeah.
He's trying to infiltrate.
So he's not trying to, like, clear his name for 92% of the movie, and then in the last 8%.
Patrick Swayze.
Yeah. It felt very unearned.
It did. Well, because it was, like, I said this to you in a text message, but this movie was written by people who were trying to sort of, like, understand, like, another walk of life, and also they were, like, complete idiots. So there's a translation of another movie that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In Point Break, Keanu Reeves tracks down Patrick Swayze / Vin Diesel in Australia and doesn't let him go. He lets Patrick Swayze sort of, like, choose the way he dies. He knows that Patrick Swayze's going to go, like, surf this tidal wave and just, like, eat it and drown. And he, like, lets him do that instead of go to jail.
Yeah.
That is not what happens in Fast and Furious. He's like, I have Stockholm Syndrome. You can go. Like,
I
what?
never thought you were the bad guy until I was told you were the bad guy, so I'm going to treat you like
and
you're
then
not
you were
the bad
clearly
guy.
the bad guy, because
Yeah,
no,
that was... So before we jumped on the pod, we were talking briefly, and you said you thought this was a much more coherent movie, and I can see that versus Too Fast, Too Furious. But that whole issue of there being no redemption for Dom, yet them giving redemption to him, that to me was just a deal breaker, where I was like, no, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me as a movie watcher, as a human being. Like, no, like, you'd be like, hey Dom, like, you're a great guy and whatever, but like, you're doing some bad shit, man. Like, you should probably go to jail for this. But he just instead gives up a police career, spoilers for Too Fast, and then lets Dom
also
go.
spoilers for Point Break.
Yeah. Yeah, if you haven't seen
We've
1986's
ruined two
Point
movies
Break,
for the price of one.
3 really, if you count Too Fast, Too Furious.
Right.
Yeah, the acting in this movie outside of maybe Vin Diesel and Vin Diesel alone, I mean,
I agree,
is bad.
Yeah, Paul Walker just sort of like I said, he doesn't act so much as he just kind of delivers lines.
Like, there's that scene where he's in the Dodgers parking lot, just like, I guess testing his car is what we find out in the next scene. And he like does something, and I don't know what he does. And then he like stops at a fence where he didn't crash through it. And I was like, oh, goody. He didn't crash through that fence and fall off that cliff. And then he's like mad. And I'm like, well, I don't understand what just happened.
My favorite Paul Walker thing, and this also kind of like exposes, like I said, the sort of like the laziness of the script writing, is that okay, so in any movie or literature, when like a really common device in order to make it natural that people are explaining what's going on is to have somebody be like a novice. Somebody gets brought in, and so they're the person that asks questions, and then that person's like, "Oh, this is how this works." Like, right?
How does
that's like
racing
what the entire
a quarter
Harry Potter
mile
series
work?
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that's who Paul Walker is. Paul Walker is like the character here who's like being brought in, and that means everyone else around him is constantly explaining what's going on, and that's fine.
But he knows
but
too
the one
much.
thing he knows too much, but there's one detail where I'm like, I'm surprised Paul Walker didn't ask for more information. So one of the key points, like one of the things that they're moving to that happens kind of like in Act 4 of 5 in the movie is this like illegal drag racing event in the desert. Do you remember what that event is called?
Mike, not only do I remember that it was called Race Wars.
Race Wars.
I plan on having Race Wars tattooed on my chest.
So Paul Walker, like day one of being like, hey, we're bros now. And they're like, yo, you should prepare for Race Wars. And he isn't like, what? He's like, cool.
Yeah, I
And
totally
they're like,
get it.
yeah, it happens in the desert. And he's like, no problem. I am so ready for Race Wars.
Do I bring a
Like,
knife or some guns? And they're like, no, we race cars.
Yeah.
It's a pun.
Like, where my whites at?
Dom, can we be on the same team? What are you? Are you Italian?
Yeah,
What's
what
happening?
are you? Yeah. So that was my point where I was like, they could have lampshaded that to be like, what? It's called a Race Wars? And it would have been natural for someone to be like, no, it's an illegal drag racing event in the desert. But someone was like, yeah, you down?
Yeah, I mean,
And he was like,
it's
I'm in.
It's pretty obvious that it's just a play on words, but also, yeah, like having some.
You think someone would point it out?
Side character being like, "Yo," like it would have been a little comic relief, and yeah, it would have helped explain it. But yeah, like if the Fast and the Furious comes out in 2021, they ain't calling that thing Race Wars.
Yeah.
Again, this is 2001, where Jackie Chan can say the N-word in a movie twice.
Right. I want to believe like this is my kind of like scenes that were not included, but that like Paul Walker arrives and is like, oh, this like wasn't what I expected, but like, okay.
He's just wearing a sleeveless T-shirt and he's got a
I still have a
swastika
car,
tattoo
so-
on his left shoulder,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, I'll put a shirt on.
Yeah. All right. that was one of my favorite details. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, race wars, no problem. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Uh,
I thought a lot of the plot stuff in the first movie was not very good. So one of the things that they set up is that the Asian character who is supposed to be like the fall guy in the middle of the movie, like 45 minutes in, like he asks for three of everything when he's like robbing the car dealer guy, the car parts dealer guy. And the only time we've ever seen a group of three so far in the movie is when the truck gets hijacked at the beginning of the film by the three cars. So it's like, oh, well, that's mystery solved because the only three reference like that we've gotten in this film is in the opening scene. So this must be the bad guy. It turns out that was just all coincidence because even though Dom doesn't have like two close associates, he's got like Letty, his girlfriend, and he's got like two other schmucks who hang around.
Yeah, that dude with the mesh tank top.
That guy's a fucking asshole. But like so the four of them are a group. So why do only three of them drive cars? It's like a plot contrivance just to confuse the audience, and I don't care for those.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, like Too Fast, Too Furious had like an old switcheroo as well. That was kind of like, oh, okay, all right, like dial it back there, Shyamalan.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I mean, there's a lot of lazy script writing because the point isn't to make a coherent movie or a coherent narrative. The point is to like, just put things in between racing sequences, which like is fair enough.
And I
like
get
Paul.
that, like getting from car chase scene to car chase scene with minimal plot necessary is fine. But we just watched contemporary films, Rush Hour, where there are 3 or 4 big fight scenes as opposed to racing scenes. And the plot is thin and there are misdirections, but it's all earned. Like we watched a much better version.
Yeah.
Like you replace Jackie Chan with a Honda Civic and you basically have the same movie.
Yeah.
Like, so, and I mean, also Rush Hour has a much more charismatic lead and, second fiddle.
It does, yeah.
But looking at those films, coming from those films, which again, absolutely contemporary to these films, it's just like, man, Rush Hour isn't cinema, but it's a well thought out like way to get from action sequence to action sequence, and Fast and the Furious does not feel well thought out.
I agree. I mean, I think I hope this has been clear with all the stuff that we've like evaluated, but like at no point are we sort of like deriding entertainment for not being Citizen Kane. Like there were zero expectations that like this movie would compare. This is not like cinema. This is like fun. But even when you do things that are fun, they can still be well structured and well organized. That can be an element of the fun. And I mean, I think what you're getting at, and the way that I feel about it too, is an aspect of it is respecting your audience. That when you respect your audience, you offer them things that like have a cohesion and richness and a depth that they can work with. When you think that your audience is stupid, you don't have to do that. And the people who make these movies think that their audience is stupid. Their audience might not be stupid, but they think they're stupid.
Yeah, and that's what I found. This is what I have high hopes that things are going to get better as the series goes along. From everything that I've heard from people who I respect their opinions of, the movies understand better what they're going for, and that's deliver a couple comedic bits, have 3 or 4 action scenes that look great, and then just like do what you need to do to stitch all that stuff together. And again, there's nothing wrong with a film like that. honest to God, that's the Marvel Cinematic Universe at its heart.
That's true. That's fair. Yeah.
And I love
I mean,
those movies. They're not great movies. They're not my favorite movies at all time, but I enjoy watching them because they don't take me out with stupid plot contrivances of like, hey, let's get 3 of everything, Thanos. And then it's like, oh, well, Thanos wasn't the guy. It was actually Toretto.
right. Wouldn't that be sweet?
I mean, once this
Vin Diesel is
and
Groot.
once this film series, once Fast goes to space, which I think they're supposed to in Fast 10, I think that's when they just join Guardians of the Galaxy and he gets turned into Groot and Paul Walker becomes the Milano.
I want that shit so bad. Like, I thought, I mean, Disney is like untouchable now. I thought during Avengers Endgame that they should have just incorporated a Harry Potter character and be like, what? What are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do about it?
Oh, and look
It
over
belongs
there.
to
That's
Marvel
Chewie. Guess what?
Yeah. Right? Like, fight me. I'm Disney. There's one other thing, like I said, that is like, hey, what if I could write about other people, but I'm not going to try? On one hand, Jesse, the kind of like engineer character, is they try to establish ADD as a real thing, which like in 2001 was like, it wasn't a real thing yet.
I disagree. As someone who is diagnosed with ADD in the mid 1990s,
Sure.
I felt like this was a horrifically out of date portrayal of someone who lived a privileged life and then heard about ADD, and that was like, that must be crippling. And now, 20 years later, we know pretty much everyone has it if you're annoying to your teachers.
Yes, exactly. If you just won't shut up, you have ADD. Sometimes dogs do now too.
Is that DADD?
So this character's introduced like, I have ADD, but like cars calm me down. Like, okay, fair enough.
Well, yeah, they make
and
him.
And then one of the key plot
like
points
in the 2021 version of this, he has Asperger's.
He has Asperger's, yeah. Because one of the key points in this is that like he makes a really key choice, that a fatal mistake, and nobody can warn him because he can't hear them through his ADD. And it's like, okay,
this is not how any of this works.
Yeah, and, like I said, nobody, like, people saw the script and they were like, light that shit up. Yeah, take some hookers and cocaine out of petty cash. Of course you can make this
also
movie.
If the street racing scenes toward the beginning, again, instead of Paul Walker being a fish out of water, helping us to establish him both as like the perspective of the viewer of the film and as like our entrance into this society, he just knows everything about street racing already, and that's bad script writing. But if all of these people want to avoid the cops while they're street racing, maybe they shouldn't paint dragons all over their fucking cars.
That's a note that I have for Fast and Furious 2. So I have 2 notes in front of me. One is that these both movies rely on one trope that like basically all of the conflict is driven by the police undermining their own work every step of the way. So all cops are idiots, and that's the only reason why the plot is driven along. Like, nobody else is doing anything. The cops are just sort of like at odds with themselves the entire time. And then the second thing is...
Yeah, that's especially true in 2.
Yeah, and the second thing is people seem to have this idea that they're going to be able to complete tasks or complete things that require discretion with the most non-discreet looking vehicles that you can possibly find.
Like, could you identify the vehicle? Absolutely. It was bright yellow.
It had
a fin on the back that was 14 feet tall. There was a nude painting of Giselle Bundchen on it. It was like, yeah, these... Like, you don't need to put out an APB.
Like, looks like Paul Walker screaming in it the entire time.
Yeah, these cars are the least conspicuous cars in the history of cinema.
Also, apparently the cops can just sort of like, yo, we just went to a chop shop and put $100,000 into this car, but we really need you to bust this drug dealer for like $10,000. This guy is stealing DVD players.
DVD player.
Here's a
Mike,
huge.
They're not DVD players, okay? They're TV DVD players all in one, okay? That technology is just coming out of Japan, okay?
That was huge.
It was funny when they opened up the tractor.
When we bucked the tyranny of laserdiscs.
It was funny when they opened up the tractor trailer and it was all just like shit you wouldn't even want in your house in like a crawl space these days. No, like it's worth tens of thousands of dollars. It's like, really? That's a 23-inch CRT TV. Why is that worth anything? Is there copper in it?
Wow, look at that VHS DVD combo right there.
Also, speaking of their cars, apparently their cars are painted in gasoline because the Japanese biker gang
Vietnamese
biker gang.
It's okay. It was pretty nondescript because they didn't make it.
They just started shooting at one of Paul Walker's cars and it just bursts into flames.
Right. Green flames.
They were mostly shooting the windshield too. So I don't know what their windshields are made out of for racing, but it seems flammable.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was wildly inappropriate, knowing what I do know about this series, is that Paul Walker and his girlfriend Mia in this film, which Mia is not in 2 at all. I believe, I'm pretty certain they both get married and have kids in this series. And
do they?
I believe so. And in the first scene that Mia and Paul Walker meet, like romantically, the background is Nate Dogg's "I've Got Hoes" in different area codes.
Yeah.
Knowing what we know now, I don't think that's the right music.
Who is she, by the way, too? So she's working at this diner, but also when they're doing the house party, she's like doing homework.
Yeah.
What age is she? Is she a college student? Like what?
Yeah, now that you mention that, I didn't remember the homework, but yeah, you're right. I mean, she's Dom's sister. We know that.
Yeah, well, do you remember there was a fake script like 15 years ago that circulated? It was like a fake Michael Bay script for The Dark Knight. Do you remember that?
Don't.
Okay. It like the way this script was written was definitely how that was written. So it was as if Michael Bay had written The Dark Knight. And one of the kind of like the side remarks, or kind of like one of the setting little remarks was I can't remember which female character it was that emerged in The Dark Knight, but it was like, she has amazing boobs because she is the hottest woman in the world, but she also has glasses because she's the smartest woman in the world. Like, that is how someone wrote this movie, where it's like, well, she's really hot, but also she has homework, so she's like not a bitch or anything. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, someone was like, listen,
we gotta make her seem like she's more than just a great ass, and their only way of doing that is like, she's studying.
Give her a textbook.
We don't know what she's studying for, or how old she is, or why any of this matters.
So she's like not a bitch or anything, like all these other chicks. Like oh, okay.
Yeah,
this is your motivation.
There were moments.
You're not trying to fuck everybody.
There were definitely moments in this first film where, like, there was a speech. I think Dom, like, I don't even remember. It's from my notes. I think Dom gives a speech about like his dad or something. And that speech was like, one decent speech makes this movie like 10,000 times better. Instead, they just kind of fumbled that too. Again, because just the script was just half-assed. And really, like, if you make that scene work, Paul Walker letting him go at the end of the movie works, probably. But they just don't hit it, and it absolutely falters.
That was it. It was the quiet sequence in the middle of the action movie. It introduces like a Chekhov's gun of this car that comes up at the end. It could have been used way better, and it wasn't used at all.
It's Chris Tucker referencing how he doesn't like his partner because his dad had a partner and his partner wouldn't get out of the car and his dad died. And you know, his whole cop career is trying to justify his dad dying in the line of duty. Again, Rush Hour. not a great movie. But that little scene makes you emotionally care about the characters. It's manipulative
Yes.
in all the right ways. And this movie
Right.
just couldn't do that.
Right. And another thing to remember as we're talking about this is that like tropes and conventions are a key part of any movie because they communicate certain narrative ideas to an audience. Like you want tropes and conventions. So it's entirely reasonable to just sort of build a movie around those things. It's just that the way that this utilizes tropes isn't thoughtful.
No. I was, however, surprised to see that the theme that kind of resonates throughout the series, according to people who I know and trust, this movie, and I mean, I've made jokes about this before, is that this movie is Dom saying, this whole series is about Dom saying, like, I don't have friends, I got family.
Right.
And that I was shocked, I tell you, to see that actually came up in the first movie. Where Dom does talk about like the importance of family to him. And so kudos to later screenwriters picking up that tiny,
for watching the movie,
tiny little thread and turning it into something more, because there's not a lot to work with in these first two films, but they actually took something from the first one and brought it through, apparently, in the later films.
And also, honestly, congratulations to everybody who had the foresight to participate in these two movies, because you are all like incredibly. Oh, yeah. You're all set.
Everybody's coming back.
You're all set. Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious in the last scene where like him and Dom are racing. You can just see the jumps that the cars are going off because they just filmed it so poorly and they just like left it in.
Yeah.
I was mad. That was like, it's 2001. You can CGI that shit out. Like, just take a little, like the little smudge thing in Photoshop and just smudge it out.
Hey, at that point, they were like, it's fine. This is going to make a ton of money.
And that's where the disdain for the audience was. Yeah, overall, I thought the film was pretty much what I thought it was going to be. I didn't love it, but I think it was, like I said, it was about as good as I expected it to be. I'm hoping the series gets better as we go along. What were your final thoughts on The Fast and the Furious?
There were a lot of stupid elements, but like I love stupid movies. This isn't necessarily the exact style of stupid movie that I like. But I am open. I'm very curious to know whether like I said, 3 through 8, which I have like really no memory. Not only do I not like, I've never seen them. I have no memory of like any of their like advertisements or anything. I mean, I'm interested to see if it becomes monotonous and if I get annoyed. But like right now, I'm entertained enough, and I'm also entertained enough by this concept. But let's see where we get to halfway through June. I might hate us.
That's true. All right, Mike, let's take a quick little break here, and then let's talk about our thoughts on Too Fast, Too Furious. Here's what's coming up on Subject to Blackout. Folks, life's simple. You make choices, and you don't look back. And that's why Mike and I are doing the Furiously Fast Film Fest. All throughout June, Subject to Blackout is being taken over by Dom, Han, Letty, and the gang as we binge all of the Fast and the Furious movies in anticipation of the release of Fast 9 in theaters and on HBOMax on the 25th of June. Mike and I are going to be seeing most of these films for the first time, so we're going to do what we do best. We improvise, alright? Listen, Mike and I don't have friends. We got family. And they're not that interested in us either, so we're deep diving a much beloved but very missed by us film franchise. All of you know by now that I live my life a podcast at a time, and I know it don't matter if you pod for a minute or an hour. Pod is pod. So join us, won't you, as we watch 2 movies every week in June as we try to close the gap before Fast 9 crosses the finish line. All right, Mike, so we also watched the 2003 sequel to The Fast and the Furious, the quick and dirty sequel. I don't have another word for sequel. To the Fast and the Furious, Too Fast, Too Furious, which of course features Ludacris in a prominent role as both a main side character and the theme songwriter and performer, and as a guy who generated like 13% of this movie's dialogue by people saying Ludacris quotes in the movie, even though Ludacris isn't playing Ludacris in the movie. Ludacris's music still exists. Too Fast, Too Furious is Citizen Kane.
It does make confusing things for the FFCU. Yeah. It does make the FFCU more complicated, but I don't know. So my understanding is that Ludacris, he's in more movies than this one.
Oh,
right?
yes. And pretty much anyone who's had
he's in a bunch of these.
A non-villainous role where they say like more than 5 or 6 lines is pretty much destined to come back at some point in future movies.
Word. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in this movie. They tried to like make a heist movie.
They did.
But like with cars, but as opposed to like Point Break, they didn't have to base anything. They didn't have anything to base off of it, so they just kind of like
You know what this felt a lot like? Bad Boys 2.
Ooh, I don't even remember that one.
I've seen that movie a couple of times, and there's a few reasons for it. They're both basically set in Miami. Yeah. Both bad guys are kind of the same, like, villainous drug dealer who's untouchable by the law, but he's truly evil and despicable because he'll sick rats on you. And Ava Mendes plays in both movies, I believe, an undercover cop. I think that's correct.
Yeah, well, this was Rush Hour 2. She was an undercover customs agent.
That was not Ava Mendes.
No, but I'm saying like same character.
Oh, okay.
It was also an undercover customs agent.
Yeah, which I believe that movie was 2006. So this one gets credit for coming up with it first. But yeah, there's a lot about this movie which screams mid-2000s sequel, and there's a lot of this movie which it feels, again, like you were talking about a little bit earlier, like you're trying to make a Michael Bay movie, but people don't respect that Michael Bay has 2 movies in the Criterion Collection, and I think not enough people appreciate that.
Armageddon in the Criterion Collection. Let's all take a moment of silence and remember Armageddon. Through a Glass Darkly is in there.
It's a lot of good stuff.
Seven Samurai, Hidden Fortress, Armageddon, Black Orpheus, Armageddon.
Yeah, so I just feel like there's a lot of DNA in this, which clearly, there's some sequel tropes, and there's definitely some Michael Bay-ness to this movie, and it definitely feels like a kind of rushed sequel since they could only get Paul Walker, they couldn't get Vin Diesel, right. Which is very ironic because this, even before Paul Walker's untimely and tragic death, this definitely was already becoming the Vin Diesel like cinematic experience.
Yeah, I did not want Paul Walker in this movie, but he was there.
He was there, and Tyrese joins the cast, playing Tyrese Gibson, playing Roman Pierce,
right?
And he is not particularly good. I don't think it's Tyrese Gibson's fault. I think it's just bad writing. They kind of play into some stereotypes in that,
a lot of stereotypes.
He's a petty theft.
Well, like also like all Cubans are Scarface.
Yeah, that's also there.
Well, so one of the things I really want to talk about, first of all, like there are two. One of the tropes that's carried over from the first movie is like all cops are idiots, and in this movie, the police are both doing things and also doing everything they can to undermine the stuff that they're doing. So really, like the plot is driven not by incompetence, but by like police actively working against their own interests. and like
Yes.
against their own team. So
Well, yeah, like the one cop like immediately assumes that the people he just hired to like join up with this criminal, just because they're driving south on I-95, he's like they're trying to escape and get away. So he just like blows his own thing and like tries to arrest them at a facility he should know is owned by the guy that they're trying to nab. Like, hey, maybe they're doing a thing for the guy. Maybe you should calm the fuck
yeah,
down.
I mean, so when they introduce kind of the actual plot of the movie, they explain it both to Paul Walker and to the audience at the same time. So Paul Walker has left the police force, is now in Miami. He gets brought in for like something. There's like a car race at the beginning anyway, probably how Paul Walker died, RIP. And so Paul Walker is being explained that like his record will be expunged if he like exposes this like drug ring, because I guess, like the US customs agents are looking for contractors.
Hmm.
So when he's being kind of briefed, one of the first lines that the cop says, and I was like, oh, okay, well, everyone thinks we're stupid. I have it here. Uh, so the idea is that they're trying to bust this like this drug kingpin with money, and the way they open the explanation of it is, see, the cartels have been successful getting drugs into Miami. Like, oh, really? Like they've been successful getting drugs into
No
Miami?
shit.
You mean like every single movie about Miami ever? Like what a surprise. I didn't know there were drugs in Miami. This is like
Who knew?
this is news. And then basically, yeah, Paul Walker has to infiltrate with this drug dude, which he does pretty much immediately.
Yeah. And without any issue whatsoever.
Right. So drug kingpin guy is evil. There's a scene where up until this point we just think he's kind of like rad and like really wealthy, but we're intended to believe that this guy sucks. And so he has like this detective, and he has to torture him in like one of the most like slow and inconvenient and ineffective ways that you possibly can. So this cop is like, what? He's like pinned to a table, and then
Yes.
out from this bucket, our villain pulls this live rat, which apparently was like fine to just hang out in this very tiny bucket, like didn't leave or make any noise at all.
No.
And then
No,
says that,
rats love buckets,
yeah,
Mike.
puts this rat on this guy's stomach, puts the bucket over it, and then has a blowtorch at the top of the bucket and says, like, as I heat this up, the rat is going to like dig in the direction where there's no heat.
Hmm.
But I feel like
Mike,
throughout that
I
time,
hate to say this, but this is old news to me because this exact form of torture was used in the Game of Thrones television series.
I
So
did
there
not watch
must be a
that.
thing to it. I know you have not watched it. You should, because George R.R. Martin's never going to finish the series, so you may as well watch the TV show.
So the note that I wrote was, I'm not sure if these are real rat facts. Like the dude is like talking about rats the whole time. I'm like, I don't know.
I think it's a rat fact.
Wikipedia, is what he's saying about rats true? I'm not sure. Challenge. I would like to challenge some of these rat facts.
Having seen the Game of Thrones torture scene where they do the exact same thing, I think it might be a rat fact.
Also,
Hashtag rat fact.
so you're also telling me this is in this scene. So, rat pinned under a bucket against this dude with a blowtorch. We're talking about rats. We're in Miami. Nobody's doing cocaine. Nobody's doing cocaine. Everybody would be doing cocaine.
I think that cocaine is implied. This is clearly a PG-13 movie. I don't know how much cocaine they're allowed to show in a PG-13 movie.
Everyone should have been doing blow that entire time. So
I think everyone was sprayed down with a mist of water enough that it just kind of looked like they were all on coke.
yeah, so the literal note that I took here was, how did they fuck that guy up in that club without cocaine?
You're asking the hard-hitting questions that this film is not willing to. My big hard hitting question, you skipped past 92% of this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw it in reverse, car lingo, and go back to the beginning and say, why is Paul Walker's car at the beginning of this film have the driver's side on the right side? It's never addressed in the movie. No one talks about it, but he's on the wrong side of the car for no reason.
Oh, I didn't even notice that, but I wasn't
Yeah.
paying very close attention, and that's probably what everybody who made this movie was expecting.
Yep. Paul Walker is sitting on the right-hand side of his car, and there's a steering wheel there, and the gas, and his nitrous oxide is where a normal American driver's seat would be, and none of the other cars, because again, this is Miami, none of the other cars have that situation going on. They're all sitting on the left side. It was a very bizarre choice, never mentioned, never spoken to again. But I do like that this film does a couple of things. Again, I'm hoping that the series continues to take off, and I know that it will kind of run with this idea in the third film, is that they don't just do straight line racing. The first race seems like it's going to be a straight line quarter mile race, but then they turn left.
The Mario Kart.
And then they turn left a couple more times, and they get back to where they started.
It's a circuit.
And that, Michael, is called a circuit race.
It's a circuit.
And I thought that was creative.
Mario Kart.
And they also did like the 2-car race turnaround at the end to win back the like American muscle cars. And I thought that was creative. Like, hey, these aren't just straight line races. Like, you're giving me something other than like go fast and then press the NOS button. So I did appreciate that they were willing to change it up a little. I was very disappointed by how much of it was not cool car stunts and how much of it was just like blurry mid 2000s CGI. Yeah. Well, and story as well. But I was hoping for more car stunts than I got. The car going on the boat looked practical in shots, but yeah, just not enough cool car stunts.
One of the questions I have that I feel like screws the entire premise is that basically Paul Walker, his job was to drive these duffel bags of cash from point A to point B so this drug kingpin could leave Miami forever. But like, this isn't like 1950. Like, this is taking place in 2000. So why did this guy just have like just cash just like built behind drywall? Why didn't he just have it in like an offshore account? He's in Miami.
So I mean, I think
did they lampshade that?
I think one of the big problems with being a drug dealer is how much cash you have to actually have. I don't know how true that is today in our modern world, but it was probably true enough in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where in 2003, the drug dealers who were transitioning to more offshore accounts probably weren't well known, and good, interesting writing is something that so far has escaped this series. So, right. So they just went with the classic trope of the drug dealer having to get his cash, out.
Here's my other question. Okay, so Ludacris and this Asian chick are kind of like established as supporting characters, and they come back in the end and like
Suki.
And they come back in the end in this like kind of significant way. So there's a completely pointless and stupid switcheroo that happens that like the audience can't follow. It's just there to be like, So
I mean, didn't you see it coming from 9 miles away?
Yeah, but it was kind of like, it was so stupid. It was like nobody planned that. It wasn't synchronized. Like it was lazy writing. But so the police stop who they think are in these 2 cars, but actually it's not Paul Walker.
It's Ludacris and Suki.
Right, but then they're like, "Damn it! Well, we're gonna give you tickets." They're not like,
even though they were running from the police as well. Yeah, like even if they know for a fact, like, oh well, you switched cars,
right?
like, even if they know that, like, for a fact, like, they were still evading the cops until they stopped.
Right. You're
And
also
cops
aiding.
aren't usually chill about that, especially when black men do it.
No, they were like aiding and abetting. And then the best part is like after the switcheroo happens, Paul Walker is on the phone with Ludacris, who's like using his name. He's like, yo, Paul Walker, like as he's being written a ticket, as if the police aren't going to be like,
wait, you know where
who
Paul
are you
Walker
talking
is?
to? Who are you talking to?
I
Like the police
plead
are
the
like,
fifth.
damn it.
Oh, you win again, cell phone technology. There's no way to know
we
who
can't
he's
talk
talking
to him.
to.
Crap.
So the reason I know Suki's name is because right before we started this, I was looking her up because I was like, man, I recognize her from something, and it's not Too Fast, Too Furious because I've never seen this movie before, except for maybe the last 5 minutes. And then I remembered she is the Asian lady from Sin City in 2005 who gets a barrel in some guy's eye. And yeah, that she had a movie career in between the years of 2003 and 2005 from what I can tell, and she's not horrific. Like, she's not bad in this.
There you go.
In fact, like, they kind of play it up like female empowerment when she comes in second to Paul Walker in the first race. They're like, hey, look at what ladies can do. They can finish behind white men, you know, ladies can do anything as long as it's behind white men. like the movie feels real, patting itself on the back. Like, hey, we didn't let that sexist Mexican win. Like, a movie, I don't think you understand how tone deaf you're being right now. Because all of your female characters are wearing exactly 13 square inches of clothes.
Does Ja Rule ever make a reappearance in this franchise?
Ja? I don't think Ja comes back. Ludacris is a main staple of the later films.
All right.
I know that for a fact. But I do not believe Ja continues to pop up.
Sure.
He was too busy scheduling Firefest.
That's a disappointment. Yeah, this is another movie where the police are like, hey, do you want these two like elaborately souped up cars that we just kind of had available? It's like, wow, you guys are really well funded and you have a chop shop.
Well, the other thing is like,
that's cool.
I think what is implied is that those cars were impounded.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, okay, again, all of these cars are extremely unique and memorable.
Right.
Which works for a movie, but doesn't work for pretending like you didn't get these from the cops who clearly impounded them 3 weeks ago. I was glad that they didn't replace Dom's character with a like for like, because I feared at the beginning of this movie when they went with Tyrese, who is a again, I don't even know what Vin Diesel is. I don't know his ethnicity, but they went with another dark-skinned bald guy to pair up with Paul Walker, and his character has a history of being in jail. And I was like, oh no, they're just going to run back the exact same character. But actually, Tyrese was pretty different from Dom Toretto. And I appreciated that they didn't just... It didn't feel like they were replacing him like for like, and that made me happy.
I mean, I'm on Vin Diesel's Wikipedia page right now, and Vin Diesel has stated that he is, quote, of ambiguous ethnicity.
I would agree.
And he self-identifies as, quote, definitely a person of color. So there you go. That's
it's hard to argue
Vin
otherwise
Diesel.
without knowing anything about him or his family.
Oh, Vin's his last name? Diesel's not even his real last name?
His real last name
is Mark. His name is Mark. Ooh.
Is it
Mark?
Is it Mark Diesel?
Mark Sinclair.
Oh, that's a dweeb name.
Yeah, it's lame.
So one of the biggest issues that I had with Fast and the Furious 1 is that Paul Walker just lets Vin Diesel go for no good fucking reason. And, you know, by the power of Grayskull, Too Fast, Too Furious actually gives Paul Walker a reason for doing that. He says that he feels so bad about what happened to Tyrese in not letting him know that he was about to get busted, that he did Vin Diesel a favor and let him go.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like the laziness. We're like, all right, we'll retcon it. People have a problem with it. All right, we'll just like write.
I didn't expect them to, and I was so pleasantly surprised. I was like, that was the biggest thing that was like, this is dumb. And they actually like corrected that, and it's stuff like that, Mike, that I'm excited about where this series is gonna go. I'm like, if it gets progressively better, which this movie arguably doesn't get much better, but in my opinion, it's better than the first one because it doesn't have a giant plot hole in it where someone just lets someone go because Point Break exists. I'm excited to see, you know, if this series can get to the quality of writing of Thor 2 with with really fun practical car stunts, then I'm in. I'm in. Cuz every time they did something cool with a real car in either one of these films, I was like, yo, John Wick the shit out of this.
I want that John Wick experience. I liked when we watched John Wick 2 and 3 back to back, and they're like,
we watched all three in one day.
Yeah, okay, we did watch all three in one day. So over the course of a day, we saw between 500 and 600 confirmed kills.
Oh yeah.
Like, I was really desensitized after that. Like, I want to feel that way again. I want to absolutely feel that way.
Yeah, in the middle of John Wick 3 that day, like, so I had mentioned that I hadn't seen John Wick 1. This was about this time last summer, I want to say.
Yeah.
And you were house sitting at my parents' house. I came over and I just like mentioned that I hadn't seen John Wick, and you're like, we have to watch that movie today. We watched John Wick 1 in the afternoon, and I was like, yo, is 2 any good? And you're like, Tim, 2's better. And so we watched John Wick 2, and I think John Wick 3 just come out on like HBOMax or whatever, and so we watched John Wick 3 too. And like, yeah, by the middle of the third one, I was like, oh, I guess this is okay. And then there's that knife scene where they enter like the antique knife store, and I was like, yo, this is baller. Like, you got me again. Like, yeah.
And they're like, Lawrence Fishburne, what are you doing here? Awesome.
Larry Fishburne rocking the shit out of stuff. Yeah, I mean, man, that's what I'm hoping for, is because like I thought John Wick like was just gonna be one of those dumb movies like Fast and the Furious, and it just absolutely wasn't, because it was gun fu, and that's awesome as shit. And I just
way better than Equilibrium.
I just want car fu so bad, and I think that's what we're gonna get by the end of this.
I want Carfu.
Yeah, so the end of this movie is fun dumb. They do like the secret car swap, which, yes, I agree with you 100%. The, you know, pretending like the audience doesn't know what just happened and letting Ludacris and Suki like be like, oh, hey, we're not, you know, Paul Walker. It's like, yeah, we fucking know. You did a whole thing. Like, and so once they do that swap, I was like, all right, that's kind of clever. And then that leads directly into like, you know, the car jumping onto the boat. But here's my question. Here's what directly precedes a cool action sequence where they're hoping you forget what just happened. Eva Mendes gets found out as the informant, gets put on the boat and sent to the lower decks with some henchmen, because presumably the bad guy is going to do some bad guy stuff to her and then kill her. And then a car lands on the boat, and the bad guy isn't hurt at all by that, because he sees the car.
No one's hurt.
He sees the car flying at him. So he just gets below deck and the car lands on top. And then he comes out with a big old shotgun and somehow misses his shots, while Paul Walker miraculously like takes him down with one pistol shot.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, because the bad guy's getting up and is about to kill Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson because, they should both have serious concussions from the giant accident they were just in. And he has a shotgun, so you don't have to be a surgeon with it. All of a sudden, Eva Mendes comes up and is just, there's no bad guys to be seen. I don't know how she disarmed them or if she was just like, hey guys, you know how we're friends? Do you mind if I just go upstairs for a second? Like, how does she get back to the top of the boat to save Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson if she was about to be murdered downstairs? It makes no fucking sense. They never address it. And that was another one of these things where it's like, this movie isn't Rush Hour good.
No, I mean, like, there's so many things in this movie. We'll have to keep thinking about, like, whether it's pulp or whether it's stupid, because, like, I mean, there's, like, extended car sequences where they're weaving in and out of traffic, and, like, nobody in traffic reacts to it at all.
That's true. Unless there's a cop in between two tractor trailers, and then they get squished.
And then, so the truck just keeps driving.
Yeah, the tractor trailers are like, cars are bouncing off of me. I guess I'll keep going 65. And then that guy gets fucking flattened. That was a cool practical scene where that car just gets run the fuck over by a tractor trailer.
It was, but it's not a TIE fighter. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely weird. Like, hey, you just had two cars drive in between the two of you. Maybe slow down and look around. And there are literally like a Blues Brother amount of cop cars behind you. You should probably
every cop in Miami.
You should probably slow down and stop. All right, Mike. Our journey brings us to Tokyo Drift and Fast and Furious next week.
Great.
So we will be deep diving those. Do you have anything else that you have been consuming this week as far as media and pop culture?
I do, but we're so action packed. I'm gonna hold my energy and hold out for Tokyo Drift. I know that movie's gonna change my life.
That's wise. I've heard good things. I've also heard bad things. A lot of people don't like this movie. Patrick H. Wilms from YouTube, who was kind of one of the people who inspired me to do this dive into the Fast series, talks about how it's maybe his favorite version of these films, or at least one that really kicks the movies into second gear. We're going to be introduced to some new and beloved characters because neither Paul Walker nor Vin Diesel are our main characters in this film. I do believe Vin Diesel makes a cameo appearance at the end, I think. But yeah, we're going to be thrown into a new country with a new cast of characters before we get reunited with Dom and Letty from the Fast and the Furious. So I'm looking forward to next week, and I hope everyone listening is as well. And for those of you listening along, you can always head over to Subject Blackout to reach out to us or to find links to our socials, including Instagram, Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on any of those. And last, you can find Mike on Instagram and Twitter at Name Taken Podcast. Mike, I want to thank you for joining me again.
Thanks, Tim.
Until next time.